The voicemail came in while I was standing in line at the pharmacy, holding a paper bag of generic cold medicine and trying not to cough on the woman in front of me. "We need to talk about your grandmother's house," my sister said. Her voice was clipped professional, the way people sound when they've already decided the outcome. "Call me tonight. It's urgent." She hung up before I could respond. That was how it always started. Not with concern, not with kindness, always with property. I stared at my phone as the automated system asked for my rewards number, my heart sinking in a way that felt far too familiar. My grandmother had been dead for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of silence. No calls, no cards, no shared memories. And now suddenly there was urgency. I paid, took my receipt, and walked out into the late October air. The sky was low and gray, the kind that presses down on your shoulders. I remember thinking how strange it was that grief didn't feel dramatic. It felt administrative. My name is Claire Donovan. I was 31 years old, living alone in a small apartment I owned just outside Providence, working as a senior operations analyst for a regional healthcare network. I paid my bills on time. I kept my life neat, quiet, manageable. And I hadn't spoken to my family in almost 3 years. Not since the night my mother told me I was too sensitive to be part of adult decisions. I called my sister back from my car. "What's going on?" I asked. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mom and Dad are selling Nana's house." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "They can't. It wasn't left to them." There was a pause on the line, just long enough. "Well," she said carefully, "that's what we need to discuss." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. The house. The old salt box on Maple Ridge Road. The one with the screened porch and the crooked steps and the apple tree my grandmother refused to cut down even after it dropped fruit on the roof. The house my grandmother promised me. "She left it to me," I said. "She told me, more than once." "That's not what the will says," my sister replied. "Of course it didn't." "Did you read it?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "We all did. Dad handled it." That sentence landed like a punch to the ribs. My father handled it. I closed my eyes and let my forehead rest against the steering wheel. The memory came back uninvited. The last Thanksgiving I attended, my grandmother sitting at the end of the table, squeezing my hand and whispering, "Don't let them talk you out of what's yours. You're the only one who listens." She died 2 months later. "Claire," my sister said, her tone shifting, softening just enough to sound reasonable. "This isn't personal. It's just practical. The house is old, taxes are high, Mom and Dad need liquidity. You live so far away now." "I live 40 minutes away," I thought. "You were never around anyway," she continued. "Nana changed her mind near the end. You know how she got." There it was. The same narrative recycled. Nana was confused. Nana was fragile. Nana didn't know what she was doing. Just like me, apparently. "I want a copy of the will," I said. Another pause. "You can come by the house on Sunday," my sister said. "We'll talk it through as a family." No email, no attachment, no paper trail. Just a living room conversation where I would be outnumbered, talked over, and subtly reminded of how difficult I was. "I'll be there," I said. I hung up and sat in my car until the windshield fogged. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something colder settle into my chest, the kind of awareness that comes when a pattern finally shows itself clearly. This wasn't about the house. It never was. It was about erasing me again. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator through the wall. I thought about all the ways my family had rewritten me over the years, how I was labeled dramatic when I asked questions, ungrateful when I said no, difficult when I didn't fall in line. I thought about how my grandmother was the only one who ever noticed. She used to say, "You see things, that's why they don't like you." At 2 a.m, I got up and opened my laptop. I didn't search for wills or probate law right away. I searched for emails, old ones, buried threads between my grandmother and me, notes she sent when my parents stopped inviting me to holidays, little check-ins, photos of the garden, mentions of paperwork. And then I found it. An email from 3 years ago, subject line, "Just in case." "Claire," she wrote, "I don't trust them to do what I asked. The lawyer explained everything. I made sure it was clear. The house is yours, not theirs. If anything ever feels wrong, promise me you won't stay quiet." Attached was a scanned letter, a letter from her attorney. I read it twice, then a third time. The house was placed in a separate trust. Beneficiary me, not my parents, not my sister, me. I sat back, heart pounding. They knew. They had always known, which meant the story they were telling now wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a lie. Sunday morning, I drove to my parents' house with the letter printed and folded in my bag. The same house I grew up in. White siding, blue shutters, perfect lawn. The house where appearances mattered more than truth. My mother opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Claire," she said as if surprised, "you made it." The living room smelled like lemon cleaner and control. My father sat in his usual chair, legs crossed, hands folded. My sister perched on the edge of the couch, phone face down, already irritated. We didn't sit down before my father spoke. "Let's keep this calm," he said. "There's no need to make this emotional." I smiled. "I agree," I said, pulling the letter from my bag and placing it gently on the coffee table. "Let's stick to facts." The paper lay there between us. No one touched it. My mother's smile faltered. My sister's eyes flicked to my father. And for the first time since the voicemail, I saw something shift. Fear. I straightened my spine and met their gaze. "You sold the house without telling me," I said. "A house you knew wasn't yours." My father cleared his throat. "That document doesn't mean what you think it does." I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. "Oh," I said calmly. "Then this should be very easy to explain to a judge." The room went silent, and in that silence I realized something that changed everything. They thought I would back down. They always did. They had no idea that this time I wasn't here to ask. I was here to take back what was already mine, and that was only the beginning. By the time I drove home that Sunday afternoon, my hands were still steady. That was how I knew something fundamental had shifted. In the past, any confrontation with my family left me shaken for days. My stomach would knot. My thoughts would loop. I would replay every sentence, wondering if I had been too harsh, too emotional, too much. That was the training, years of it. But this time I felt clear. Not triumphant, not angry. Clear. The silence in my parents' living room after I mentioned a judge hadn't been accidental. It was strategic. They were recalibrating. They always did. My father didn't yell. My mother didn't cry. My sister didn't storm out. They smiled. "Well," my father had said, eventually folding the letter neatly and sliding it back across the table toward me, "we'll have our attorney review it." Of course he would. "Please do," I replied. "Mine already has." That was a lie. At least not entirely true yet. But I knew enough to know this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated attempt to see if I still doubted myself more than I trusted evidence. I didn't. That night I emailed the attorney whose name appeared on my grandmother's letterhead. I expected a delay. It was a Sunday evening. Instead, I got a response within the hour. "Claire," he wrote, "I remember your grandmother well. She was very clear about her wishes. Let's talk tomorrow." I slept for the first time in weeks. Monday morning, I sat in my office with the door closed, my calendar blocked under the vague label of personal appointment. The attorney's voice was calm, precise, unhurried. A man who had no emotional stake in my family dynamics, which made him dangerous to them. The trust was executed properly, he said, filed, recorded, and funded. The property was never legally theirs to sell. I exhaled slowly. "Then how did they?" I asked. "They shouldn't have," he replied, which suggests either misrepresentation or outright fraud. There it was. The word no one in my family ever used. Fraud. "They listed the house with a local broker," I said. "The sign's already up." "That's not unusual," he said. "People try things when they assume no one will challenge them." He paused. "Did they expect you to challenge them?" I thought of my mother's smile, my sister's rehearsed calm, my father's certainty. "No," I said. "They expected me to fold." "Then they underestimated you," he replied. "Your grandmother did not." By Wednesday, I had retained him formally. By Thursday, letters were sent, one to the real estate agent, one to the buyers, one to my parents' attorney. The listing came down within hours. That was when the tone changed. My sister called first. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said, skipping hello entirely. "You're making this ugly." "I didn't make it ugly," I replied. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't." "You don't even want the house," she insisted. "You live somewhere else. You don't need it." I smiled to myself. They always framed value in terms of need. "I want what was left to me," I said. "That's all." She scoffed. "You're being vindictive." "No," I said. "I'm being accurate." She hung up. My mother tried next the following evening. She left a voicemail instead of calling directly. "Claire, sweetheart," she said softly, "we're worried about you. This fixation isn't healthy." Nana was confused near the end. "You know that. We're trying to protect you from a legal mess you don't understand." I deleted it without responding. My father waited longer. He showed up at my apartment on Friday evening unannounced. I opened the door and felt something in my chest tighten. Not fear, recognition. This was his favorite tactic. Appear in person. Control the environment. "May I come in?" he asked. "No," I said. He blinked. "I just want to talk," he said. "This doesn't need to escalate." "It already did," I replied. "When you sold property that wasn't yours." His jaw tightened. "You always jump to extremes," he said. "This could have been handled privately." I leaned against the doorframe. You had years to handle it properly, I said. You chose not to. His voice dropped. You don't know the pressure your mother and I are under. There it was. The shift to burden. You don't know what it takes to keep a family afloat, he continued. We've sacrificed for you. I laughed quietly. You locked me out of decisions, I said. You dismissed me when I asked questions. You told me to trust you. I was your father, he snapped. I didn't owe you transparency. You owed me honesty, I replied. And Nana owed me nothing. She chose me. His face changed then. The mask slipped. She was manipulated, he said coldly. By you. I felt the words hit, but they didn't land. That's what you tell yourself, I asked. That an 86-year-old woman who ran her own business for 40 years couldn't decide who she trusted. She was sentimental, he said, and you exploited that. I stepped back and closed the door. Not slammed, not dramatic, just closed. That night my attorney called. There's something else, he said. The buyer's attorney forwarded documents we requested. What kind of documents? The purchase agreement, he replied, and the disclosure forms. I frowned. What about them? There's a signature, he said, purporting to be yours. The room went very still. My signature, I asked. Yes, he said carefully, on a consent addendum, acknowledging you waived any claim. My stomach dropped. I never signed anything, I said. I know, he replied, which means someone signed it for you. Forgery. I sat down slowly. They didn't just try to sell it, I said. They tried to erase me. Yes, he said, and that changes everything. By the end of the call, my hands were shaking for the first time that week. Not from fear, from understanding. This wasn't a family disagreement. This was a strategy. They hadn't just assumed I would stay quiet. They had planned for it. And for the first time since my grandmother died, grief finally broke through the armor. Not grief for the house. Grief for the realization that the people who raised me were willing to commit crimes to keep control. I sat in the dark long after midnight staring at nothing. Then I opened my laptop again. Not to search for answers, but to prepare. Because if they were willing to forge my name, then this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about reputation. And I was done letting them define mine. By morning I had a plan. And somewhere deep inside I felt my grandmother's presence not as comfort, but as resolve. Don't stay quiet, she had written. I wouldn't. And they were about to learn exactly what that meant. The first thing I did Monday morning was request a copy of my credit report. It might seem unrelated, but once you realize someone is willing to sign your name without permission, you start wondering where else your identity has been used as a convenience. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, scrolling through pages of accounts, balances, inquiries. Everything looked normal at first. Student loan mortgage, 2 credit cards I barely used. Then I saw it. A line of credit opened 18 months ago at a regional bank I had never used. Balance $9,800. My breath caught. I clicked into the details. The mailing address listed was my parents' house. The authorized user was my father. Primary account holder Claire Donovan. The room felt like it tilted. I called the bank immediately. The representative was polite, apologetic, procedural. She asked security questions, verified my identity, put me on hold twice. Ms. Donovan, she said finally, will need to open a fraud investigation. I never opened this account, I said. I never authorized it. I understand, she replied. Based on the information you've provided, it does appear unauthorized. I hung up and sat very still. This wasn't sloppy, it wasn't impulsive. It was systematic. That afternoon, my attorney confirmed what the bank already knew. Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery. Each one stacked neatly on top of the other like layers in a cake I never asked to eat. You need to decide how far you want to take this, he said, because once law enforcement is involved, there's no undoing it. I thought about my mother's voice, concerned, soft, worried about me. I thought about my father standing in my doorway telling me he didn't owe me transparency. And I thought about my grandmother labeling envelopes in careful cursive, making sure I was protected. Take it all the way, I said. That night, my sister sent a text. Can we talk, she wrote, please. I didn't respond. She sent another. Dad says this is getting out of hand, I finally replied. It was out of hand when he signed my name. She didn't answer for hours. When she finally did, the message was short. You're tearing the family apart. I stared at the screen, then typed. No, I'm exposing what was already broken. On Wednesday, my attorney filed an injunction to prevent any future attempts to sell or transfer the house. On Thursday, the bank froze the fraudulent account. On Friday, a detective left me a voicemail asking to schedule an interview. The momentum was real now. That was when my mother showed up. She didn't call first. She never did when she wanted to control the narrative. She arrived mid-morning just as I was logging into a video meeting. I muted myself, stood up, and opened the door. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a cardigan, hair carefully styled, eyes already damp. Oh, Claire, she said, stepping forward. This is all such a misunderstanding. I didn't step aside. You can't just involve the police, she said quickly. Families handle things internally. Families don't forge signatures, I replied. She winced. Your father was under a lot of stress, she said. You know how he gets when he feels cornered. So you let him open credit in my name, I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't know about that, she said. Not until recently. I studied her face. It was a good lie, practiced, designed to sound reasonable. You knew about the house, I said. You knew it wasn't yours. She swallowed. Nana told us she was confused, she said. She said things she didn't mean. I leaned against the doorframe. She told me she didn't trust you, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked up sharp. She never said that my mother snapped. She did, I replied, more than once. Silence stretched between us. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. We want to settle this, she said quietly. I didn't take it. Inside, she explained, was an offer, a payment, a compromise. If I dropped the complaint, they would make me whole. Money for the house, money for the credit account, money to smooth things over. Think about your future, she urged. This kind of thing follows people, employers, relationships. There it was, the threat dressed up as concern. You already used my name without permission, I said. Why would I trust you now? Her voice hardened. You always do this, she said. You escalate. You make everything bigger than it needs to be. No, I said, I document. She stared at me, something ugly flashing behind her eyes. You think you're better than us now, she said. I think I deserve the truth, I replied. She straightened. If you go through with this, she said, don't expect us to protect you anymore. I smiled. You never did. I closed the door. Later that day, my attorney called again. There's another issue, he said. Your parents filed a petition this morning. For what? To challenge your grandmother's competency at the time the trust was executed. I laughed. Of course they did. They're claiming undue influence, he continued, that you manipulated her into cutting them out. I closed my eyes. Can they do that? They can try, he said. But they're opening themselves up to discovery. Medical records, testimony, witnesses. My grandmother's doctor, her accountant, her neighbors, her church friends. People who knew exactly how sharp she was. Let them, I said. That weekend I drove past the house on Maple Ridge Road. The sign was gone. The porch looked the same. The apple tree had dropped its fruit rotting on the ground. I sat in my car and didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I already knew what it represented. Not just inheritance, but proof. Proof that my grandmother saw me clearly when no one else did. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You think you've won it red, but you don't know everything yet. My heart skipped. I stared at the screen. Then another message came through. Ask your aunt about the trust amendment. My hands went cold. There was an amendment. I started the engine. Because if there was something I didn't know, then the story wasn't finished yet. And whatever my family was hiding, they were finally desperate enough to hint at it, which meant I was getting closer. Much closer. I didn't drive home after that message. I drove straight to my aunt's house. Aunt Margaret lived 20 minutes north in a quiet development where nothing ever happened, and everyone knew exactly how many times your trash bin went out each month. She was my mother's older sister, the family historian, the keeper of polite silences, the one who never picked sides out loud, but always knew where the bodies were buried. She answered the door slowly, peering through the screen before opening it fully. Claire, she said, surprise flickering across her face. This is unexpected. So was the text I just got, I replied. Can I come in? She hesitated. That was answer enough. Inside, the house smelled like chamomile and furniture polish. Everything was tidy to the point of sterility. Margaret gestured for me to sit at the kitchen table and poured tea with hands that shook just slightly. I assume this is about your parents, she said carefully. It's about my grandmother, I replied, and an amendment to her trust. Margaret froze. Just for a second. Then she sat down slowly, folding her hands in front of her. I was hoping you didn't know about that, she said. My stomach dropped. So there was an amendment, I said. Yes, she admitted, but not the way they're implying. I leaned forward, start talking. Margaret took a deep breath. About a year before your grandmother passed, she said your parents pressured her to change the trust. I felt heat rush to my face. Pressured how? They framed it as protection, she said. They said you were unstable, that you couldn't manage property, that the house would become a burden. There it was again, that word. Unstable. They wanted control. Margaret continued. They wanted the trust amended so they could manage it on your behalf. And did she, I asked? Margaret shook her head. No, she said. She refused. Relief and anger collided in my chest. But there was an amendment, I said. Yes, Margaret replied. After that conversation, my pulse quickened. She amended it to add conditions, Margaret said quietly. Protections. Protections for who, I asked. For you. She stood up and walked to a cabinet. She unlocked it, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the table between us. I kept a copy, she said. Your grandmother asked me to. I opened the folder with hands that were suddenly unsteady. Inside was a notarized document. The amendment didn't remove me as beneficiary. It did the opposite. It added a clause stating that if any party attempted to sell, transfer, or encumber the property without my written consent, that party would forfeit any inheritance gifts or future distributions from the estate. And there was more. Another clause. If any party attempted to challenge my grandmother's mental capacity without documented medical evidence, the trust would immediately release all records to the court, including written statements naming specific individuals she feared would attempt to manipulate her legacy. I looked up slowly. She named them, I said. Margaret nodded. Your parents, by name. The room felt very quiet. She was lucid, Margaret added. Angrier than I'd ever seen her, but clear. She said she was done being treated like an obstacle instead of a person. I swallowed hard. So if they challenge her competency, I said they trigger their own consequences. Yes, Margaret said, and they know it. That explained the desperation, the forged signature, the attempt to settle quietly, the sudden concern for my future. They weren't just trying to win, they were trying not to lose everything. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Margaret looked down at her tea. Because your mother asked me not to, she said. She said you were fragile, that this would hurt you. I laughed bitterly. They always say that. I know, she said softly, and I should have trusted you more. I closed the folder carefully. Thank you for keeping this, I said. It may have saved me months. It may save you more than that, Margaret replied. There's something else. I looked up. Your grandmother also left letters, she said. One for each of you. Yours was sealed. My heart thudded. Where is it? With the attorney, she said. He wasn't authorized to release it until a dispute arose. A dispute had definitely arisen. I drove home in silence. That night I barely slept. The next morning my attorney confirmed it. The letter existed. It had been unlocked due to the competency challenge my parents filed. He read it to me over the phone. Claire, if you're hearing this, it means they tried to take what wasn't theirs. I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed. I want you to know that nothing they say about you is true. You are not unstable. You are not difficult. You are observant, and they fear that. I left you the house because it's the only thing in this family that was never built on pretending. I had to ask him to stop. I couldn't breathe. After I collected myself, he continued. The letter also states he said that she anticipated retaliation. Of course she did, I whispered. She specifically instructed that if you were accused of manipulation, the trust administrator should pursue sanctions. I smiled for the first time in days. Good, I said, because they just accused me of undue influence. He paused. Then they've walked into their own trap. By the end of the week, the court dismissed their competency petition. Not only dismissed it, flagged it. The judge ordered an inquiry into the forged consent document and referred the identity theft to the district attorney. My sister called that night sobbing. They're going to lose the house, she said. Everything. Why are you doing this? I didn't do this, I replied. They did. But you could stop it, she insisted. You could call it off. I thought of my grandmother's letter. I won't, I said, not this time. After I hung up, I stood in my living room and looked around at the life I built without them. The quiet, the order, the truth. They thought they could rewrite me again. They were wrong. Because now the story was documented, and in the next chapter they were going to realize something far worse than losing the house. They were about to lose their version of reality. The first subpoena arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays had always been my mother's favorite day to pretend everything was normal. Grocery shopping in the morning, phone calls in the afternoon, controlled chaos, predictable routines. This Tuesday predictability was gone. My attorney called before noon. They've been served, he said, both of them. With what I asked, though, I already knew. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, and the civil action tied to the trust violation. I sat back in my chair, and their response, they retain separate counsel, he said, which tells me two things. Tell me. First, they're turning on each other. Second, this is about to get very ugly. He was right. That evening, my father emailed me for the first time in years. Not a text, not a call. An email. Formal. Careful. Written the way he used to write clients when he thought tone alone could establish authority. Claire, I am writing to express my deep disappointment in how this situation has been handled. Your mother and I are willing to discuss resolution options, but only if you immediately cease cooperation with law enforcement and withdraw the civil complaint. What you are doing will have long-term consequences for everyone involved, including yourself. Let us handle this like adults, Dad. I read it twice, then deleted it. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed something I had been circling for weeks. He didn't see me as a daughter. He saw me as a problem to manage. That night my sister showed up at my door. She looked nothing like the polished version she curated online. No makeup, hair pulled back, hands shaking as she clutched her phone. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said, stepping inside before I invited her. I closed the door slowly. "What didn't you know?" I asked. She paced the room. "The credit card," she said, "the signatures, the letter Nana left. I swear, Claire, I didn't know." I watched her carefully. "Did you know they were selling the house?" I asked. She hesitated. "Yes," she admitted, "but they said you agreed." "And did that sound like me?" She winced. "No." There it was. The moment she realized silence was complicity. "They told me you were unstable," she whispered, "that you were paranoid, that this was for your own good." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not anger. Grief. "They told everyone that," I said. "That's how they kept control." She sank onto the couch. "They're terrified," she said. "Dad hasn't slept. Mom keeps crying and then stopping abruptly like she's rehearsing." I almost laughed. "Almost? They think if they can get you to back down, it all goes away," my sister continued. "The lawyers, the court, the investigation." "They're wrong," I said. She looked up at me. "You're really not stopping, are you?" "No," I replied, "because this isn't about punishment. It's about record." She frowned. "Record? I need it documented," I said, "so no one ever gets to say I imagined this." She nodded slowly. "I get that," she said. "I really do." Then she did something I didn't expect. She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. "There's something you should see," she said. On the screen was a photo. A screenshot of a group message. Family only. My parents, my sister, 2 cousins. The date stamp was from 6 months ago. My mother had written, "She's becoming a liability. We need to finalize this before she starts asking questions." My father had replied, "I'll handle it. She always backs down eventually." My hands went cold. "You kept this," I said. I didn't know why she said. I just felt wrong about it. I handed the phone back. "This changes things," I said quietly. "I'll testify," she blurted, "if it comes to that." I studied her face. "You're sure?" She swallowed. "I don't want to live like this anymore," she said, "always pretending nothing happened." I nodded. That night, I forwarded the screenshot to my attorney. He called me within 10 minutes. "This establishes intent," he said. "They didn't make a mistake. They planned it." The next development came faster than I expected. The district attorney's office formally charged my father: forgery, identity theft, attempted financial exploitation. My mother was named as a co-conspirator. The word landed hard. Co-conspirator. When the news broke locally, my phone exploded. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, old neighbors, people who had believed the version of me my parents sold. Some apologized, some didn't. One message stood out, from a woman I barely remembered. "Your grandmother tried to warn us. I'm sorry we didn't listen." I cried then. Not because of vindication, because it was the first time someone acknowledged what she had endured too. The house on Maple Ridge Road sat empty now. The sale was frozen. The accounts were under review. The image my parents had built for decades was unraveling in real time. And still they fought. They leaked stories. They claimed confusion, stress, misunderstandings. They said I was overreacting. But evidence doesn't care about tone. Documents don't bend to narrative. And once the truth is filed, it doesn't go away. On Friday, my attorney called again. "There's a court date," he said. "Preliminary hearing." "When?" "2 weeks." I hung up and sat in silence. This was no longer theoretical. This was public. And somewhere deep inside, something settled. Not relief, resolve. Because now it wasn't just about the house. It was about the pattern, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the quiet theft of identity and confidence. They thought I would protect them. They were wrong. In the next chapter, they would try one last move, and it would cost them everything. The last move came disguised as concern. It always did. 3 days before the preliminary hearing, my attorney called with a tone I hadn't heard yet. Not alarmed, calculating. "They're floating a narrative," he said. "Of course they are," I replied. "What kind?" "They're preparing to argue diminished capacity," he said. "Not your grandmother's, your father's." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "He forged my name," I said. "Opened credit in my identity. Tried to sell property that wasn't his. That's not diminished capacity. That's entitlement." "Agreed," my attorney said. "But they're going to claim stress, anxiety, pressure, possibly depression. The goal isn't acquittal, it's sympathy." "And mitigation," I said. "Yes," he replied, "and to paint you as vindictive." There it was, the final pivot. If they couldn't deny the facts, they would attack my motive. That afternoon, my mother sent a letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter, handwritten, carefully worded, delivered by certified mail. "Claire, I know you're hurting. I know you feel betrayed. But I need you to understand that your father is not well. The pressure of everything has taken a toll. He is seeing a doctor now. He is fragile. I worry that what you're doing could push him over the edge. I'm begging you as a mother to reconsider. You don't want to live with this guilt. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer, because there it was again. Responsibility, her favorite weapon. I was supposed to carry his choices, his crimes, his consequences. I didn't respond. Instead, I scheduled my own meeting, not with my attorney, with a therapist. A woman recommended by a colleague. Calm voice, no nonsense. The kind of professional who didn't flinch when I summarized the last 3 months of my life in 20 minutes. Tell me what you're afraid of, she said. I didn't hesitate. That they'll convince everyone I'm cruel, I said. That I took things too far. She nodded. And what would taking it too far look like, she asked. I thought about it. Destroying them, I said slowly. Taking everything. Watching them fall. She leaned back. And what are you actually doing? I met her eyes. Letting the truth stand on record, I said. She smiled gently. Then that's not cruelty, she said. That's boundaries. That night, my sister called again. I need to tell you something, she said. Her voice sounded different, quieter, stripped of drama. I went through Mom's files, she continued, the ones she keeps in the cabinet by the hallway. My pulse quickened. What did you find? Notes, she said. Printed emails, copies of documents. About what? About you, she replied. I closed my eyes. She kept records, my sister said, of everything. Conversations, arguments, times you disagreed. She labeled them episodes. I felt sick. She's been building a file, I said. Yes, my sister confirmed, in case she ever needed to prove you were unstable. I exhaled slowly. Did you take pictures, I asked. Yes, she said, everything. When she sent them, my hands trembled. Pages of notes. Claire questioned finances again today, exhibiting paranoia. Claire accused us of hiding information. Emotional outburst. Claire resistant to guidance, fixated on control. Dates, times, interpretations, a manufactured history. She's been planning this for years, I whispered. My attorney's response was immediate. This is gold, he said, not for her, for us. How, I asked. Because it demonstrates premeditation, he replied. She wasn't protecting anyone. She was constructing a narrative. The preliminary hearing arrived on a gray morning that smelled like rain. I wore a navy coat, simple, unremarkable, the opposite of dramatic. Inside the courthouse, my parents sat on opposite sides of the room. Separate attorneys, separate strategies. My father looked smaller, older. His confidence gone, replaced by something frantic. My mother looked composed, calm, almost serene. She believed in optics. The judge listened. The evidence spoke. Forgery, bank records, messages, screenshots, the trust amendment, the letter. Then my mother's attorney stood. We asked the court to consider the emotional context, he said. This is a family matter that escalated unnecessarily. The judge raised an eyebrow. Forgery is not emotional context, she said. It's a crime. My father's attorney tried next. Mr. Donovan was under extreme stress, he said. He was not thinking clearly. The judge flipped through the file. Then perhaps, she said coolly, he should not have been thinking at all before signing someone else's name. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The hearing ended with the judge setting a trial date. No dismissals, no reductions. The story moved forward. Outside, my mother approached me. Claire, she said softly, please. I stopped walking. This has gone far enough, she said. People are talking. Yes, I replied. That's what happens when lies run out. You're enjoying this, she accused. I met her eyes. No, I said, I'm surviving it. Her face hardened. You always wanted to punish us, she said. No, I replied, I wanted the truth. She scoffed. You think a courtroom will give you peace? She asked. I thought of the therapist, of my grandmother's letter, of the quiet strength I felt when I stopped explaining myself. I already have peace, I said. This is just paperwork. She watched me walk away. 2 days later, my father was arrested. Not handcuffed in public, not dramatic, but processed. Charged! Booked! The image circulated quietly. A mugshot leaked online by someone who recognized him. The comments were brutal. I didn't read them, because this wasn't about humiliation. It was about consequence. And in the next chapter, they would learn the one thing they never expected. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. The day my father was released on bail, I didn't feel relief. I felt confirmation. Confirmation that this had never been about stress, confusion, or poor judgment. The speed with which he lined up a bondsman, the precision of the paperwork, the way his attorney immediately began shaping the next narrative, all told me the same thing. He was still trying to control the story. I found out he'd been released not from my family, but from a reporter. She emailed me with a polite subject line and a sharp question. I'm covering the Donovan case. Your father was released this morning. Do you have a comment? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied with a single sentence. The facts are documented. I trust the court to do its job. She never wrote back. That afternoon, my attorney called. There's movement on the civil side, he said. Your parents are preparing a countersuit. I laughed softly. For what I asked. Reality. Defamation, he replied. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. They're claiming you damaged their reputation. I leaned back in my chair. By telling the truth. Yes, he said, that's their angle. Let them file, I said. I have receipts. He chuckled quietly. That's exactly why they'll lose. 2 days later, my sister asked to meet me. Not at my apartment, not at a coffee shop near our parents' house. She chose a diner off the highway neutral territory. The kind of place where no one lingered long enough to overhear more than fragments. She arrived early, already seated, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. I moved out, she said the moment I sat down. I raised an eyebrow. They don't know where I'm staying, she continued, and I'm not telling them. That was new. What changed, I asked. She looked at me, really looked at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time. I saw the files, she said, the ones Mom kept, the notes about you. I nodded. She had a file on me too, my sister added. Smaller. But it was there. I felt something twist in my chest. What did it say, I asked. She swallowed. That I was impulsive, image-focused, easily influenced, useful. They didn't just lie about you, she said. They categorized us. I stirred my coffee slowly. That's what controlling people do, I said. They reduce everyone to a role. She nodded. I don't want a role anymore, she said. I want a life. I studied her face. You know testifying against them will change everything, I said. There's no going back. I know, she replied, but there was never really a family to go back to, was there? I didn't answer. She reached into her bag and slid a folder across the table. There's more, she said. Mom's journals. Not the polite ones, the private ones. My pulse quickened. Where did you get these? She left them in the house, she said. I scanned everything. Inside the folder were pages of handwritten entries. Dates, observations, plans. If Claire ever challenges us legally, emphasize emotional instability. Judges respond to concern, not facts. Maintain united front. If one of us falters, redirect blame. Worst case scenario, paint her as vindictive. She hates looking cruel. I felt my throat tighten. She knew, I said. She planned, my sister replied. I closed the folder carefully. Thank you, I said. This helps more than you know. She hesitated. There's one more thing, she said. Dad's attorney called me. I looked up sharply. What did he want? To feel me out, she said. To see whose side I'm on. And I asked. I told him I needed time, she said. But he warned me. Warned you how? She met my eyes. He said if I testify for you, they'll claim I was manipulated. That I'm unstable too. I exhaled slowly. That's their playbook, I said. They isolate, discredit, divide. I won't let them, she said firmly. Not anymore. That night, I forwarded the journal scans to my attorney. His response was immediate. This is devastating, he said. It demonstrates long-term intent to deceive. What does that mean for the case, I asked. It means they can't claim this spiraled accidentally, he replied. It was orchestrated. The countersuit was filed the following week. As expected, it framed me as bitter, vengeful, unreasonable. They alleged emotional harm, loss of standing, public embarrassment. My attorney's response was concise. Truth is an absolute defense. The judge agreed. The countersuit was dismissed within days. The fallout was swift. Friends distanced themselves from my parents. Invitations stopped coming. My mother's volunteer position quietly disappeared from the website. And then came the call I didn't expect. From my father. The jail phone cut his voice down to something small and distorted. Claire, he said, we need to talk. No, I replied. Please, he said, just listen. I closed my eyes. I listened my entire life, I said. This time I'm done. You don't understand what you're doing, he said desperately. You're burning bridges. I'm building boundaries, I replied. You think you're strong, he said bitterly. But you're alone. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I was alone before I said, now I'm free. I hung up. The trial date loomed closer. Witness lists finalized. Evidence organized. Narratives locked. And for the first time since this began, I felt something unexpected. Not dread. Anticipation. Because the truth wasn't just coming out. It was about to be spoken out loud. Under oath. In a room where lies didn't get to be rewritten. And when that happened, everything they built would collapse. Not because I pushed it, but because it was never stable to begin with. The courtroom smelled like old paper and disinfectant. It was the kind of sterile scent that stripped emotion from the air, forcing everything into facts and timelines. I arrived early not because I was anxious, but because I wanted to sit in the silence before the room filled with stories people would try to sell as truth. My attorney placed a legal pad in front of me. You ready? He asked quietly. I've been ready for years, I said. Across the room, my parents sat with their respective attorneys. They didn't look at each other. That alone told me everything I needed to know. The alliance that once felt unbreakable had fractured under pressure. My mother noticed me first. Her expression flickered. Not fear, not remorse. Calculation. She leaned toward her attorney and whispered something. He nodded. That was when I understood the real purpose of today. They weren't here to win. They were here to control damage. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. The trial began. The prosecution moved methodically. Bank records, signatures, timelines, emails, text messages. The forged consent document was projected onto a screen so large it felt like a public shaming. This signature, the prosecutor said, purports to be the defendant's daughter's. My father stared at the table. It is not hers, the prosecutor continued. A forensic analyst confirmed that. My mother's attorney shifted in his seat. Then came the trust documents, the amendment, the clauses my grandmother had written in careful, furious clarity. When the letter was introduced into evidence, I felt my chest tighten again. Not grief, pride. The prosecutor read it aloud. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning. When he finished, the judge looked directly at my parents. This letter is explicit, she said, and it anticipates precisely the behavior before this court. My mother pressed her lips together. Then the defense began. My father's attorney leaned heavily on stress, pressure, overwhelm, a lifetime of responsibility. He never intended harm, the attorney insisted. This was a mistake fueled by exhaustion. The prosecutor stood. A mistake repeated across multiple financial instruments, she said calmly. With planning, with concealment. The judge nodded. Then it was my mother's turn. Her attorney painted her as a peacemaker, a mother caught between loyalty to her husband and concern for her daughter. She believed the attorney said that intervention was necessary. The prosecutor didn't object. She simply waited. Then she introduced the journals. My mother's face went pale. The pages appeared on the screen. Dates, notes, strategies. The courtroom murmured. Mrs. Donovan, the prosecutor asked gently, "Did you write these entries?" My mother stood slowly. "Yes," she said. And in them, the prosecutor continued, "You describe a plan to portray your daughter as emotionally unstable if she ever challenged you legally. Is that correct?" My mother hesitated. Her attorney whispered urgently. "Yes," she said finally. "But they were private thoughts. I never acted on them." The prosecutor nodded. "Except she said you did." She listed it all. The forged consent, the credit account, the attempt to sell the house, the competency challenge, the narrative shared with relatives. Each item landed like a weight. My mother's shoulders sagged. Then the prosecutor said the one thing my parents hadn't prepared for. "We call the sister to the stand." My sister stood. She looked small in that witness chair, but her voice didn't waver. She testified about the files, the messages, the instructions, the pressure to stay quiet. They told me, she said, that if I spoke up, I'd be next. The judge watched her carefully. "And why are you speaking now?" the judge asked. My sister looked at me. "Because silence doesn't protect you," she said. "It just protects the people hurting you." I felt tears sting my eyes. Not sadness. Release. Then it was my turn. I stood. I took the oath. I sat. The questions were straightforward. Did you sign the document? No. Did you authorize the credit account? No. Did you give permission for the sale? No. The defense tried next. They asked about my relationship with my grandmother. Suggested closeness bordering on influence. Did you encourage her to change the trust, they asked. No, I replied. She told me she already had. Were you aware she excluded your parents, they pressed? Yes, I said. She explained why. And what did she say, the attorney asked. I looked at the judge. She said she was tired of being lied to, I replied. And she didn't want her legacy used as leverage. The attorney tried to provoke emotion. Do you hate your parents? He asked. No, I said. I just stopped protecting their lies. That was it. No outburst. No breakdown. Just the truth. When testimony ended, the courtroom felt drained. The judge recessed for deliberation. In the hallway, my mother approached me. Her face was bare now, no performance left. You didn't have to do this, she said. Yes, I replied, I did. You've destroyed us, she whispered. I looked at her. You destroyed yourselves, I said. I just stopped cleaning up after you. The judge returned. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. Her ruling was calm, detailed, final. Guilty on all counts. The civil judgment stood. The criminal case would proceed to sentencing. Assets frozen, trust enforced, house returned to rightful ownership. The judge looked at me. This court finds that the plaintiff acted appropriately, she said, and with restraint. Restraint. The word echoed. Outside the sky was clear. My sister stood beside me. I don't know what comes next, she said. I do, I replied. Peace. She nodded. As I walked away from the courthouse, my phone buzzed. A notification. One last message from an unknown number. You think this is over? I didn't reply, because it was. What they didn't know yet was that the final consequence wasn't legal. It was personal, and it was coming. The real aftermath didn't begin in the courtroom. It began in the quiet. 3 weeks after the verdict, the noise fell away. No more hearings, no more filings, no more frantic calls from attorneys or reporters pretending they wanted balance when all they wanted was spectacle. What remained was vacuum. And vacuum reveals everything. My parents were sentenced quietly. No dramatic perp walk, no cameras. My father received a suspended sentence paired with probation, mandatory restitution, and a permanent financial oversight order. My mother avoided jail time entirely, but was barred from managing any trust estate or fiduciary role for the rest of her life. The judge's words were precise. You abused access. You abused authority. You abused trust. That last one mattered most. They appealed, of course. It was automatic, habitual. But the appeal stalled quickly. The evidence didn't bend. The house on Maple Ridge Road was officially transferred into my name. The first time I walked through it alone, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief that had finally found a place to sit. Dust coated the windowsills. The furniture my grandmother loved was gone, sold, or removed during my parents' attempted sale. The walls felt stripped, as if the house itself had been violated. I walked slowly from room to room. The kitchen where she taught me how to knead bread. The hallway where she kept family photos no one else wanted to display. The small back room she called her office, where a single bookshelf still stood untouched. Inside it, tucked behind old tax records and gardening manuals, I found something unexpected. A notebook. Not legal, not financial. Personal. Her handwriting filled every page. Claire doesn't need rescuing, she needs room. I sat on the floor and cried for the first time since this began. Not because of what I lost, but because of what she saw in me long before I saw it in myself. The next wave came from the outside. My mother's social circle evaporated. Invitations stopped. Phone calls went unanswered. People who once praised her generosity now avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Reputation, I learned, is a fragile currency. My father's former colleagues distanced themselves quietly. No confrontations, no apologies, just absence. And absence hurts more than anger. My sister cut contact completely. Not just with them, with anyone who tried to pull her back into the narrative. She started therapy, took a job in another city, changed her number. One night she called me from a new phone. I don't feel guilty anymore, she said. That's progress, I replied. I used to think loyalty meant silence, she said. Now I know it means honesty. I smiled. That lesson cost some people a lifetime, I said. The messages didn't stop entirely. Anonymous emails, half-hearted apologies from distant relatives, passive-aggressive notes about forgiveness and family unity. I ignored most of them, until one arrived that didn't fit the pattern. It was from my mother. No greeting, no apology. Just a single paragraph. You always wanted to be right. I hope it was worth it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed my response. I never wanted to be right. I wanted to be safe. I didn't send it. I didn't need to, because safety no longer required explanation. The final twist didn't come from my parents. It came from the estate. My attorney called on a Thursday afternoon. There's a remainder clause, he said, one we didn't discuss earlier. What kind, I asked. Your grandmother left discretionary funds to be released at the trustee's judgment, he said. For a purpose, she specified. My pulse quickened. And the purpose was contingent, he said. It activates if the trust is challenged in bad faith. I laughed softly. She thought of everything. She did, he said. The funds are substantial. How substantial, I asked. He told me. I closed my eyes. And what's the condition, I asked. They're earmarked, he said, for legal advocacy, specifically for women contesting financial abuse within families. I felt something click into place. Not revenge, legacy. My grandmother didn't just protect me. She anticipated others. Within weeks, I set up a foundation. Quiet, focused, relentless. No branding, no press. Just resources. Legal fees, counseling, education. Women who had been told they were dramatic, difficult, unstable. Women who had been erased. The first grant went out before the year ended. The email I received back was simple. No one ever believed me until now. I sat at my desk long after reading it. This was the real consequence. Not jail time. Not financial penalties. Exposure. Exposure of a system that thrived on silence. My parents never contacted me again. Not directly. Not indirectly. They moved to a smaller town, lived quietly, shrunk. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't mourn it either. Because the final reckoning wasn't theirs. It was mine. And as the year closed, standing in a house that was finally honest, I realized something I hadn't expected. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment it stopped belonging to them. And in the next chapter, I would choose what came after justice. Not revenge, but something far more permanent. Justice has a strange aftertaste. Once the adrenaline fades and the structure collapses, you're left with something quieter than triumph. It isn't satisfaction, it isn't closure, it's a stillness that asks a harder question. Who are you when no one is watching you survive anymore? The foundation took shape slowly, intentionally. I refused urgency. Urgency had always belonged to them. I wanted steadiness, process, care. We rented a small office above a nonprofit legal clinic. 2 desks, 1 filing cabinet. A kettle that whistled too loudly. I didn't put my name on the door. I didn't want it to be about me. The first women who came through didn't look like victims. They looked like teachers, accountants, mothers, daughters, grandmothers. They sat with their hands folded and apologized for taking up space. That was the pattern. I don't want to make trouble. I just want to understand my options. I'm probably overreacting. I recognized the language immediately. I'd spoken it fluently once. We listened, we documented, we connected them with attorneys who understood financial abuse wasn't just about money, it was about control, about rewriting reality until doubt did the work for you. One afternoon, a woman named Ruth stayed behind after everyone else left. She was 61, widowed. Her son had convinced her to sign over power of attorney after a minor surgery. 6 months later, her savings were gone. They say I agreed, she whispered. They say I don't remember. I looked at her across the desk. Do you remember, I asked? She nodded. I remember saying no. That's enough, I said. Her case went to court 3 months later. She won. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. Victory wasn't the point. Agency was. Around that time, my sister sent me a message. A picture of an apartment balcony overlooking a different city. A plant on the railing. Sunlight. No captions. No explanations. I smiled. Some separations don't need ceremonies. My mother's name surfaced once unexpectedly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned she had applied for a volunteer board position at a regional charity and been quietly declined. She seemed surprised, the acquaintance said, like she thought it was a mistake. I said nothing. Reputations don't disappear in explosions. They erode. Grain by grain, each unanswered call, each closed door. I didn't engineer that. I simply stopped intervening. One evening months later, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a thin envelope and a set of old photographs. My grandmother. Younger, standing outside the house on Maple Ridge Road, laughing, unafraid. The note was brief. She wanted you to have these. I should have given them to you sooner. No signature. I didn't need one. That night, I sat on the floor of the house and sorted through the photos. There were no pictures of my parents, none of my sister, just my grandmother living. I understood then what she'd done. She hadn't just left me assets. She'd left me proof of a life unedited. The call from my father came weeks later. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. His voice sounded older, thinner. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I just want you to know your mother isn't well. I deleted it. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Their well-being had never been my responsibility. The foundation grew. Quiet partnerships, strategic alliances, no interviews. When someone asked why I stayed anonymous, I told them the truth. This work doesn't need a hero, I said. It needs continuity. In the spring, I hosted a small gathering at the house. Not a celebration. A dinner. The women who had passed through our doors, their attorneys, advocates, support staff. We ate simply, laughed softly. At one point, Ruth raised her glass. To the woman who didn't rescue us, she said, she just reminded us we could stand. I felt my throat tighten. Later that night, after everyone left, I walked through the house alone. It felt different now. Not heavy, settled. I paused in the back room where my grandmother once worked. I opened the notebook I'd found months earlier. The last page held a sentence I hadn't noticed before. If they ever try to shrink you, make something that outlives their voices. I closed the notebook. The phone buzzed. A notification from the foundation's email. Subject line, thank you for believing me. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. This was the revenge no one prepared for. Not exposure. Not punishment. Replacement. Replacing silence with record. Replacing fear with infrastructure. Replacing control with choice. They wanted me small. I built something that made size irrelevant. And in the next chapter, I would confront the last thing I hadn't addressed yet. Not them, but the version of myself that once believed survival was enough. I used to believe survival was the finish line. If you made it through, if you stayed standing, if you didn't collapse under what tried to break you, then you had won. That belief kept me moving for years. It also kept me small. I didn't realize it until the nights got quieter. After the foundation stabilized, after the house stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like a home, I began waking up with a different kind of discomfort. Not fear, not grief. Restlessness. There were no emergencies to manage, no crises demanding immediate attention, no narratives to correct. And without those, I was left with a question I had avoided my entire adult life. Who was I when I wasn't reacting? The answer didn't come quickly. It arrived in fragments. The way my shoulders relaxed when I spoke without rehearsing. The way I no longer checked my phone compulsively. The way I stopped explaining my choices before anyone asked. One afternoon, my therapist leaned back in her chair and asked me something simple. What would you want if no one disapproved? The question landed harder than any accusation my parents had ever thrown at me. I didn't answer right away. I had built my life around endurance, around competence, around being unassailable. Wanting felt indulgent, dangerous. I don't know, I admitted. She nodded. That's honest, she said. Now we can start. Around that time, my sister came to visit. She looked different, lighter. Not because her life was easier, but because she no longer carried a script written by someone else. We sat on the back porch with tea and watched the sun slide down the trees. I'm learning how to make decisions without asking permission, she said. It's uncomfortable. It gets better, I replied. Then it gets quiet. She smiled. I like quiet. So do I said. She hesitated. Do you ever feel guilty, she asked. Not about them. About leaving who you were. I thought about it. Yes, I said, but not in the way I expected. I didn't feel guilty for cutting ties. I felt guilty for how long I stayed. For how many years I tried to earn love by shrinking. That grief took longer to process than the courtroom ever did. The next letter arrived without warning. Handwritten, familiar handwriting. My mother. I almost didn't open it. Almost! Claire. I don't know who you've become. I don't recognize this distance, this coldness. I raised you better than this. I stopped reading, because there it was. The final attempt. To reclaim authorship. To define me one last time. I folded the letter and placed it in the fire. Watching it burn didn't feel dramatic. It felt conclusive. Later that week, I met with the Foundation's advisory board. They wanted to expand, add programming, increase visibility. I listened. Then I said no. Why not? One of them asked gently. You have momentum. Yes, I said. And momentum can flatten people if you don't slow it down. I proposed something else. Smaller grants, deeper support, long-term follow-up. No savior narratives. No spotlight. They agreed. That was when I realized something had changed. I wasn't fighting anymore. I was choosing. The anniversary of my grandmother's death came quietly. No ceremony, no posts. I spent the day in the house sorting through her old recipes and notes. In the margin of one page next to instructions for bread, she'd written a sentence I hadn't noticed before. Let it rest, then shape it into something new. I laughed softly. Even then she knew. That evening I cooked dinner for myself. No audience, no meaning attached. Just nourishment. As I ate, I felt something settle that had never fully landed before. Trust. Not in people. In myself. I trusted that I would notice when something felt wrong. I trusted that I would leave sooner. I trusted that I no longer needed proof to justify boundaries. The foundation continued. The house breathed. My sister thrived. And my parents faded into the background where they belonged. They didn't disappear. They just lost relevance. That was the real consequence. Not punishment. Irrelevance. And as I sat in the quiet, I realized there was one final thing left to do. Not to them. To me. To stop telling this story as a defense. And start living as if the chapter had already closed. Because it had. And the last chapter wasn't about revenge at all. It was about what happens after you stop waiting for permission to exist. The last thing I learned was this. You don't feel free the moment the door closes behind you. You feel free the first morning you wake up and forget to look back. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. No anniversary, no milestone, no external marker that anything had changed. I woke up before the alarm sunlight slipping through the curtains and lay there for a moment without the familiar scan of my chest for tension. Nothing tightened. Nothing braced. My body wasn't preparing for impact. I got out of bed, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen counter of the house on Maple Ridge Road. The same counter where my grandmother used to line up jars of yeast and flour. The same window she used to watch storms roll in without panic. For the first time, the house didn't feel like something I had inherited. It felt like something I inhabited. Later that morning, I walked through the foundation office. The kettle whistled. Someone laughed down the hall. A woman I barely knew nodded at me with quiet familiarity, not gratitude, not awe, just recognition. That was new. I sat at my desk and opened the day's inbox. There were no emergencies, no pleas, no threats, just updates. A woman had won her mediation. Another had secured independent legal counsel. One had simply written to say she slept through the night for the first time in years. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. This was what permanence felt like. Not loud, not impressive, steady. That afternoon, I received one final message from my sister. She sent a photo of a bookshelf, a few plants, a cat asleep on a folded sweater. Caption, I think I'm okay. I smiled. You don't fix a family like ours. You outgrow it. I never heard from my parents again. Not directly. I heard about them the way you hear about old acquaintances, in fragments, through others, detached from urgency. My father's probation ended quietly. He took a consulting job far from anything financial. My mother moved churches, changed social circles, reinvented herself as misunderstood rather than accountable. I didn't follow closely. That was the point. One evening months later, I stood in the back room of the house, the one my grandmother used as her office. I opened the notebook again, the one with her handwriting, the one that started all of this. On the inside cover, barely visible, was something I hadn't noticed before. A sentence written lightly as if she didn't want it to shout. When the truth finally has room to breathe, don't rush to fill the silence. I closed the notebook. I understood now. Silence was no longer dangerous. It was spacious. I didn't need to prove anything. Not to them. Not to the world. Not even to myself. The revenge wasn't the court case. It wasn't the exposure. It wasn't watching people lose power they abused. The real revenge was this life. A life where no one audited my emotions. A life where my name wasn't a liability. A life where I trusted my own memory. I stopped being the family problem the moment I stopped trying to solve them. If you're listening to this and something in your chest feels familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. Being excluded doesn't mean you're unworthy. Being minimized doesn't mean you're wrong. And being told to stay quiet doesn't mean you owe anyone your silence. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't confronting them. It's building something so solid that their version of you can't survive in it. I didn't burn the bridge. I crossed it alone and realized I didn't need it anymore. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been cut out, talked over, erased, or told your truth was inconvenient, I'd like to hear from you. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever had to choose yourself over family. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you want more stories like this, stories about justice, dignity, and what happens when the tables turn, quietly subscribe to the channel. Someone out there needs the reminder you just heard. Take care of yourself. Keep your records. Trust your memory. And never apologize for becoming someone they can no longer control.